Hello and welcome to Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey. Today I'm joined by my old friend Casey Hackett. He was on a really old episode of the podcast where he and our friend Pat came on and talked about video games. We're talking about a video game thing kind of here too. It's The Last of Us Season 1, and I'm really excited to get into this one because it is a game I have played. It is a game that Casey played. We go into our histories with the franchise, but the show seems pretty good. Spoiler. Hey, as always, if you enjoy these episodes, please like them on the YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also get them in an audio only format if you want to listen to it on your commute. That's cool, right? Let's talk about The Last of Us. Hey, Casey, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mikey. How are you?
I'm good. I bit my lip just before we did this, and before you joined the call, I was dabbing with paper towels because it was bleeding.
Oh, that hard, hey?
Yep. Don't know. I wasn't eating anything. I just kind of bit my lip out of no reason.
Yeah. I'm bewildered. I'm at the age that I'm at, and I still will just occasionally catch the side of my cheek or my lip or my, I mean, really anything happening around here.
Just eating French fries and the whole finger goes in.
Yeah, it's just very it's humbling to this day.
Yeah.
You're like, I have done this. I've been around the block a few times.
We're getting close to 40. You think we'd be pros at this point, but no.
You think?
No. Me even more so than you. You got a little bit more youth than I do. As you can see, you have some grays. Mine are a little stronger.
Yes, I do.
We're here to talk about yours show up a little bit more there. Mine's red, so it's already auburn. It used to be bright red, but we're here to talk about The Last of Us Season 1, which is a lovely show on the HBO network that may have 9 different names by the time season 2 comes around. We'll see. But yeah, generally speaking, this isn't one of my cram sesh episodes where we talk about a whole franchise leading into a new entry or anything, but this is based on the game that we both played, and I wanted to see what your history with the franchise is, if it goes beyond just that first game, so everybody kind of has an idea of where you're at with The Last of Us.
Sure. Yeah, no. So yeah, I've actually, I played the game when it originally came out in, I think it was 2013, when I had a PlayStation 3. Whoa, that feels weird.
You had a fat boy too.
Yeah, got my OG PlayStation 3 that played all 3 generations of PlayStation at the time, a hot commodity. Really was blown away by it, especially that was at the time when I think probably the first 2 Uncharted's were out, or maybe the third had come out by then. But that was very much a series of games where I was like, wow, this company is crazy how impressive they are in terms of the narratives that they can build and the world that they build. So I just was like, wow, Uncharted was like Indiana Jones, the video game, and then The Last of Us was like severe whiplash to a strong emotional. I use survival horror in very loose terms. I don't think it's quite that, but it's the closest equivalent I can think of. But it was just really impressive. It just was like, wow, this studio is like 4 for 4. Granted, I'd never played a lot of their previous games. So loved it.
The Last of Us, Uncharted, Crash.
Yeah. Exactly. Or I forget about Jack and Daxter too, but
I
never played them.
Never cared for him.
But so I played that, and then I got a PlayStation 4, I think in 2017, 2018. Got the one that came with the bundle with the remastered version of Last of Us 1, not the remake, which I find very strange. I didn't actually play it for a long time. I actually got the PS4 for Uncharted 4.
Yeah.
Played through it, loved it. And then when The Last of Us 2 got announced in the lead up to that, I replayed part 1. It was a good refresher. It had been about 5-6 years. And then I played the second one. And I know we're not talking about that right now, but was also blown away, but also just it makes you feel things, that second one. Not that the first doesn't, but I think it's more visceral.
And did you play the DLC for the first one?
Yes. Okay, yes. Yeah. So I forget if I played it on PS3 or PS4, probably PS3, but yeah, I played through that, and it was a great add-on. I think it was only like 2 or 3 hours, but yeah, a good story.
Nice little episode.
Been a fan of the franchise, and when they announced the show, I was skeptical with most adaptations of video games they are, but spoiler alert, I thought it was great.
Yeah, and it also had, like, when they announced it, it was like with Craig Mazin. It's like, okay, little faith in that.
I actually don't. I meant to look this up. I was unfamiliar with who he was in terms of what he's done before.
He's done a variety of things. This is coming off of Chernobyl. Yeah.
Right. Yes, I do remember hearing that. I also love.
Oh yeah, he was also, I believe, involved with I think the Scary Movie franchise of all things.
Okay, I like some of them.
I'm listening. But yeah, it's more so that it was coming off of the reception to Chernobyl that this was announced, and that was sort of like the big excitement aspect of it. Similarly, I mean, I didn't. So you and I were roommates in Somerville, Massachusetts.
Yes,
represent.
Way back when.
The game didn't come out till 2013. You had already moved out by that point. Mm-hmm. So you were the one that had the PS3 in the house. I was in the Xbox ecosystem at that point. You were in that ecosystem as well. We were playing a lot of like Left 4 Dead and Rock Band and stuff at that time.
Yes.
But I think the only thing I played on PlayStation in that time period was like I bought a copy of The Force Unleashed. That was it.
I honestly, thinking back to that era, I'm like, oh, Xbox was the party platform and PlayStation was my single player platform.
Exactly.
Like, if it came out on both, it was going to Xbox if it was multiplayer and PlayStation if it was single.
Yeah, for sure. Because we were like, sometimes we would have times when like you and somebody else would be playing split screen Left 4 Dead in the living room, and I'd be upstairs on mine playing in the same party and stuff, just for that same reason. But but yeah, so you moved out before this, like way before this game originally came out. And so I actually never played it myself until I stayed, which at this point is was the wrong decision. I stayed in the Xbox ecosystem following the 360 with the Xbox One. Instead of switching over to PS4 right out of the gates. I eventually got a PS4 in 2018. So same situation, like in the lead up to part 2 was like, okay, I'm going to finally play this. And then I played the main game, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a break before I play Left Behind, because I just need to come down from that a little bit. It's very tense.
Sure.
So I did some other stuff in the meantime. And then as I was about to get into playing Left Behind, the pandemic hit, and I wanted nothing to do with hands-on with this game anymore. I was just too inundated with it in general that I was just like, I can't deal with a pandemic story that closely. But what I did do was I watched other people playing through it as they were also getting ready for it. And then when part 2 came out, I did the same thing. Like I just that was only a few months later. Because that was what, June of that year?
Yeah.
So that was, basically March to June. I wasn't over that initial stress. So I watched Andy Cortez from Kind of Funny. I watched him play through it. And that was enough for me, because it was enough I was able to experience the story without the like traumatizing impact of the gameplay of it. So that's basically how my connection with it goes. I too, like, for the same reasons, I basically had missed a bunch of the Uncharted's and basically every year I play another Uncharted, and I'm up to 4. We'll see this year if I have time to actually do it. It's kind of a packed year, but yeah, I do plan on going back and playing Left Behind and Part 2 for myself, probably in the lead up to like season 2 of the show.
Sure.
Because at that point, I think my system will have purged the tension a little bit. But yeah, yeah. I mean, you already touched on a generalized, I think it's good, but yeah, how did you feel about the show?
Yeah, so it just like right out of the gate, I thought it was extremely well done. I mean, it's an awful faithful adaptation, which, you know, when you're working with a story that I enjoyed that much, it's and adapting it that faithfully, I think it's hard to go wrong. I mean, obviously they made a couple of additions. They streamlined some stuff. I mean, I know one of the criticisms was like there wasn't enough infected, but honestly, I don't think it needed more.
Yep.
But you know, I think I was skeptical probably right up until the first episode aired, just in terms of I was like, okay, I like Pedro Pascal, but like, you know, is he going to be a good? It's just so hard to be like the way they make the games, you know, and Neil Druckmann talks about this in some of the behind the scenes stuff. It's like, you know, it did have that big question of like, why do this? Like, we already filmed this. We already acted it out. I mean, that's how they made the games, right? It's all motion capture. It's all real actors, some of the same actors, in fact, that it's like, there is that question of why do an adaptation if you're not going to change anything?
Right.
And granted, you know, right out of the gate, the first episode, they open up with that, you know, 1960s talk show or whatever. And that was interesting. Okay, that's some context for the audience to potentially like understand this. They obviously extended the opening with Sarah. But again, it was like, okay, once they got into like game mode, I was like, okay, this is it. But so again, going back to is like, I was a little skeptical of Pedro Pascal, even though he's a great actor. I love him. Was definitely skeptical of Bella Ramsey.
Wonder Woman 1984, everybody's favorite role.
Yeah. But I was only aware of her from Game of Thrones. So I was like, okay, that's okay. Let's see. And you know, it's a game that's so important to get the chemistry right. And it's different phases of the chemistry where like you see them being like Joel is resentful of her, and then eventually they're gonna like start to understand each other a little bit, and she's gonna break through the tough exterior with like her joke book, which I was so thrilled to see the joke book come out the first time. Yeah. And then to get to this point where eventually it's like, oh, like there is this very strong bond to them, and then you get to the conclusion. So overall, like to go from kind of skeptical, kind of cautiously optimistic to so quickly being like, wow, they nailed that first episode. I'll watch again. Watch the second episode. Oh, wow. Okay, this is going good. And it was really fun because I got to watch it with my wife, who had no familiarity with the game. And like, it's you know, it's that fun dynamic of like getting to watch somebody experience something that you know what's going to happen for the most part. And it was like super cool for like me to be like, oh, that was good. What did you think? And she was like, that was really good. Yeah. It's like, oh, okay. And now we're along for this ride together.
All she's caring about is it good TV? Whereas you have the, is it a good adaptation and is it good TV?
Yeah. And then I also, of course, got to lord over her a little bit. Like, I can't wait to see what you think of the ending.
Oh, you're the worst. You're the worst kind of person.
You know, well, not that from the beginning, but it was like once it continued, once by like episode 3, 4, 5, like when it was like, okay, I think this is, I think we're in the clear. Like, this is going to be a good show. That was when she was like, man, I and that was also when I started to realize like, oh, they're going to get through the whole first game in this one season. That's interesting. It's just started to make me realize like, oh man, like, I don't know. Like, and especially as you see the audience numbers are growing and doubling over the course of the show. It's like, oh, I'm talking to more people who never played the game, who have no idea what's about to happen.
Yeah, they're just
And
watching
like,
event television.
Yep. And I'm like, oh man, I kept saying to people, I was like, I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm so interested to see what people think of the ending. And especially interested to see what they think of whenever season 2 comes around.
Yeah.
All I've said is that game was very divisive.
Yep, for sure.
And I'm not saying for good or bad reasons. I'm just saying it was divisive.
It's
some people love
intentionally
it, some people
divisive. Yeah,
right.
The point of it.
Yeah. So like overall, like I just think it was extremely well done. I loved. I mean, it was just like it was so fun to watch. And actually, we had a guest staying with us this past week who we were talking up like, oh yeah, have you watched it yet? He was like, no, I really got to watch it. And we were like, well, we're going to watch the finale on Sunday. So like, if you don't want to spoil it, like you either have to not hang out with us for an hour or like, if you want,
stay
like,
in the other room, please.
Like go, you can use our TV, you can binge it. And so I actually binge watched it with him on Saturday before. I had nothing to do. It was raining in LA. Which I think
I think that's fine on a second viewing. I cannot imagine just
he was viscerally
getting hit
like
by
attached.
a truck by binging this show.
Yeah. We did take a couple breathers, but it was like, man, we got through 8 episodes in one day. And then, we watched the finale together and
just throw on some overall, Misadventures of Flapjack in between a couple episodes.
Yeah. So, but overall, I mean, I was happy I got to kind of rewatch it again just to kind of see is there any cracks if you watch it? And it's like, no, I was very satisfied with it. So, as a fan, as a fan of the game and just a fan of like good TV, is like, I think they knocked it out of the park. Like, really, like I can't think of anything where I was
knocked
like,
it out of the park fair.
Done this.
Knocked it out of the park foul.
Yes. Just very much.
That's going to be a niche reference for people.
Yeah. but yeah, I mean, I can't think of anything I would say, I wish they did this, or if I had to pick anything, I had to say any one thing.
We'll get to that because that might be spoiler stuff, and we'll do a defining spoiler. I just want to
sure.
I'll hit my top level stuff real quick, and then we'll get into all of that.
Yeah. Sure.
You did touch on like most of the stuff that I would have said anyway.
Yeah.
The pilot episode, I guess we'll call it, even though it's like the whole season was greenlit. It's not like a pilot. The use of flashbacks, I think, is flashbacks and like just extended stuff with like Sarah, I think is a very, very good way to have adapted this to this format, because in the game you have the tangential and environmental storytelling of like picking up an item and getting its background. And you don't have that here. So this, like, it for the mass audience of people who won't or haven't ever or won't play the game. I think that was probably a necessary thing to add, but I also I enjoyed it more because it allowed us to connect to both characters and the world itself more. And things like, certain items that characters carry through the show, it gives greater importance to them than before, even though like they were already important. The stuff with, like you mentioned, the TV show, like the old interview show thing. I think that was a pitch perfect way to set this up, because it is that like that's how in this world it would have been learned about these things, possibilities, and whatnot happening. So I really appreciated all that stuff, but also, and like I know that some of, like we talked about, or you talked about the how close it was 1-to-1 in a lot of ways, and when there are changes to that, how there is a certain group of the community of people who have already experienced the story who were like, why go 1-to-1, but also why go so close to it at the same time, or sorry, why not change things up a little bit, and then why also go close to it or at the same time. And like for that, the whole season, I because of where I work, I saw that conversation happening over and over and over, and I was just like, yo, gamers, you got to talk to your bookish friends, because they've been dealing with that for a long time. Every book adaptation, we have the same argument. And comic adaptation and everything else. But I think one of the strongest things with the show is, like, obviously Neil Druckmann has evolved like heavily, and that's why a lot of the look and the feel was right for the people who have played the game before. But also just like the casting on the show, like across the board, is phenomenal. Like, whether it's Pedro and Bella, whether it's Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett, whether it is Kayvon Woodard and LeVar Johnson, like, or Lamar Johnson, sorry, or using like Ashley and Troy in the ways that they did. Like, it's just a really well-rounded cast for the way that they did the show, and I think it's going to be weird. Like, I'm going to have to like argue my way out of this. I think this is the better version of the story. I don't think this is necessarily the better version of The Last of Us as a whole, because you get something more out of playing it. Like, having the controller in your hand, you do get something more out of it. But as far as just telling the story, I do think that this is the better version of that, because you don't have to like interrupt moments of meaningful story and narrative to be like, okay, well, we have to go shoot something for a little while because it's a video game. And so
I have to go upgrade my gun.
And like, I know a lot of people complained about like the lack of bricks or whatever, but it's like, that would have been a fun little thing. But do you want every episode for them to have to like, I got to build another shiv? Like, it's not.
I was actually thinking about that from like at one point during this second watch I watched on Saturday, where I was like, oh yeah, it's kind of funny they don't like wink and nod at the audience to be like, oh, I got to go craft some stuff or something. And I was like, that would be horrible if he was like, let me just put together a pipe bomb or whatever casually.
He like,
but I did
turns around from the workbench with a like.
Yeah, but I do think the way they get that kind of just quick reference, and again, it's not like you do this specifically at a workbench in the game, but it's like he has to craft a battery in the truck that Bill leaves him, and I was like, oh, okay. Now
make
that I
a
think about it, like
reason for it.
He says, you can see in the fridge, like, here's all the separate parts, and he's like, oh, I need to put this together. I need to charge it. I don't know. For me, it worked as like, cool. You're checking that box off.
Yeah, he's not building little nail bombs through the whole game.
But I almost feel like I think like if you asked Neil Druckmann, or maybe he even says this, I can't remember, but it's like, I do feel like he would say exactly what you just said. It was like, I think this is the stronger version of the story, because you get a little bit more holistic view of things, and the things that they did expand on and add on, like,
so much more meaningful.
Talks about that. He talks about that and says like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that back when I made the game the first time around. It's it's like having, I don't want to say a do-over necessarily, but it's almost like having, okay, like, let's do a second draft, and like, what could we do to make this a little bit more accessible? And I do agree with you in the sense of, obviously, yes, you do lose some things, especially with, like, again, without getting into spoilers, like the last episode as a game puts you in a situation where you may not agree with what you're about to do. And the second one is a lot of that, but, to me, that makes it compelling. And again, it's not like I necessarily am saying like I fully agree with that choice. Maybe I do, maybe I don't, depends on the day. But that is what makes the game, I think, special, is like sometimes you just feel that more, even though you're holding a controller, it's like you do have that visceral feeling of like, I'm making a decision, even though
that decision isn't actually in your hands.
Right. Like, I could put it down and be like, nope, I'm not doing that. But even though Naughty Dog games really don't let you do any sort of decision, it's literally them just walking you from point A to point B that they want you to do, which is my one big criticism about them. But
except for 4, I guess. But
4 has a little bit more open, but I mean, not a ton.
It's still point to point.
Yeah. But I mean, that is, I think that again, they want to tell the story they want to tell. And I think that everything, I was thinking about it too, rewatching it. The one part I missed that I was like kind of bummed. I was like, oh, and that part was so well done, was the beginning. I think it's the beginning of episode 2 when you see the scientist who they call in, I forget what country it is, and she's like,
they're in Jakarta.
Impossible.
Yeah.
And it's just like that sequence was just like additionally horrifying, even though we'd seen what we saw in the first episode. Yeah. It's like, oh wow, these are crazy stakes.
It was personal horrifying versus globally horrifying at this point. Yeah.
Yes. So and again, the game gives you that through context hints or documents that you find, but like obviously you're not going to do that in a visual narrative of TV. So overall I do think like the things that they added and the things that they streamlined made sense. So like that's good storytelling in my opinion, and the two things are separate. I will still probably go back and play the game at some point again. I don't know when, but I also would rewatch the show because it's very good. So it's very, they really threaded the needle of like, I think they, like I said, they nailed it in terms of adapting it and making it accessible to a ton of people. It's clearly a huge hit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we can go into the spoilers even, more so now. We were talking about like the flashbacks, which I think we both agree was like the right call, just because, it's with those audience members who will never play the game. It just helps them, like, and it makes a more well-rounded universe for us to like be able to attach to. But I just because we were talking about that the TV show aspect of it with that interview show, and it's just like impossible for me to not like see the actor in that scene without thinking of the Mummy, because he's Rachel Weisz's brother in the Mummy.
Wait, who?
The British guy that's being interviewed.
Oh yes.
Not the host. The host is the guy that was on like Silicon Valley and stuff. Yeah.
Big head from Silicon Valley.
But yeah, it's just that's a very specific thing that I wanted to mention before we moved on. But I do like the way that they fleshed out the thing we were talking about with fleshing out the story at the beginning with Sarah. I think that is just so damn well done that like the game lets you connect to her. Like you're doing these things where you are connecting to her very early on, but it's not quite the way that the show is able to convey that, because like you spend the day with her. It's not just like, okay, you're walking around the house or whatever, but like you actually spend the day with her. You see why it's not just her handing Joel the fixed watch. It's her taking the time and the energy to actually do it. And it's, it's those moments that like they would already hit hard, like knowing they're coming, but like the way that they expounded and just like gave it a little more room to breathe, like man, that the way that scene where she's taken away from Joel, it hits exponentially harder in this show, I think, than in the game. Like the game is effective. It is an emotional moment in the game, but like after just spending the entire episode with her, like it is brutal.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it helps because I was like expecting after that talk show sequence to be like, oh, okay, we're gonna see like Sarah wake up in her bed, and I was like, that'll be kind of like a really immediate moment. That I was like, I don't know if that'll work well, but yeah, I think doing it the way they did helps. Although I don't know. I mean, I'm curious. I'm curious what somebody who has never seen it would thought of that scene, because obviously it's heartbreaking. It's like any parent losing a child is horrible, especially that way is just unbelievable. But I do remember, like, when I played the game, I was like, I don't know if I've ever experienced this where you start a game as one character, and I knew you don't play as this girl, but I didn't know what to expect. You then play, you know, whatever, a 25-minute kind of almost tutorial type thing. You get used to it.
This is how you open drawers. Yeah.
Right. Like all of that. And then to be like, hey, by the way, you're thrown into like this car chase and explosions. And you're like, what is going on? How is she going to get out of this? And then to be like, oh, you don't.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to, you know, whatever the time jump is in the game. I can't remember if it's still 20 years, but, you know, I was just like, it felt like a gut punch in the game where I just felt, you know, I've died as Mario, but I come right back, right? It's like I
sacrifice Yoshi all the time.
Yeah, I don't think I could name another time where I played a game and then that character just dies. And that is part of the story. That is the start of the story. So, I mean, maybe I could think of one if I really tried, but so I think that is, I don't know if it hit me as hard, but I do think the expansion absolutely is necessary, because if they were to truly do like a 1-to-1 remake of the game, you don't have that. You don't have the moments with her and Joel in the morning. You don't have the moments of her, of seeing how she is a good daughter, how she wants to help her dad, how she, you know, fixes his watch and then says, oh, you know, I paid for it with your money. you know, it's like, it's just those nice moments.
The humanizing moments of just regular life before.
Right.
Because like, that's the thing, is even though it's like technically before everything starts happening in the game, it is pretty much in media res. Like you're like an hour before everything goes to chaos. So that extra time is just like so helpful to relay that, like, no, we're not disassociating with the media, that these are characters. Like, this is they're people. And that's what ultimately the show is about, connections you make with people. And it's not like, well, we talked about that aspect of like with the clickers and whatever, where it's like, there should be more clickers. It's like, dude, this show is about humanity and finding love and kinship and family in a world where you don't know if you should have that, because everybody else that's a human being is not necessarily trustworthy. And it's like, it's the same rules as like The Walking Dead, except The Walking Dead, every episode was like a gore fest. But you know, it is in the same line of like, you know, they all of these things, they steer clear of the word zombie, but like zombie media always has a meaning that isn't just zombies, right? Like, so this one just went harder with the fact that it's just like, it's not the main thing. That's the setting. Right. That's not the main story.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but I do feel I want to.
We can jump around. We're not going to go like one episode by one episode.
Yeah.
So it's all good.
Thank God.
my thought is you're going to skip to episode 3, probably.
Well, I wanted to just, while we're talking about connection and like all that stuff, like I do think that this is something I wanted to mention earlier. Now that we're in the spoiler zone, is like, I think if that's one thing that like I struggled with at the beginning was like, especially once I found out it was not only 9 episodes instead of the more traditional like 10 or 12, I was like, man, by episode, I want to say 4, they're still not really vibing. Like they are still, you know, butting heads about a lot of stuff. Joel and Ellie, I should say. They are, you know, there's cracks in the icy demeanor of Joel, and it's like, okay, that's when the joke book comes out, I believe, is episode 4. So you're starting to see stuff, but like, I don't know. That was one thing I talked to another friend of mine who has played the games a couple times, and I was just like, yeah, I just don't know if they're like nailing how, because like I feel like it's going to be whiplash once they become like friends, or you know, friends. But like, you know, they're going to be like the partners. Because I do think that. Because I do think that's something in the game that like you just care so much more about, I think, them, because you just spend more time with it, right? It's like a 15 to 20 hour game or something like that.
It's the thing with like how we were just talking about Sarah, like you are spending all of your time with Joel and Ellie in the game. So it's
right. So I that's the one thing that like I almost, it almost felt like whiplash with the last episode, where it was like Joel so quickly went into like, after the last episode, of like, I'm now the parent figure who's like, hey, who wants to go get milkshakes? Like, I'm trying to like make things like really, I'm really trying to connect with it. And it felt very forced all of a sudden. So like, I'm not even saying this is like a criticism. I'm just like, jury's still out for me a little bit on just like, is this enough time from when they meet at the end of the first episode to the end of the 9th episode to be like, do I fully buy that this is like the strongest bond worth doing what he does in the last episode? Because in the game, it absolutely feels like, oh, they're going to do what to Ellie? Like,
well, that's the thing is, I think with the game, that is the benefit of having some of the gameplay, because you're the one fighting through hordes of people to get to her.
People coming at you, you're shooting them, you're hiding, you're trying to like get to her.
I think it's not I don't want to say it's artificially enhanced because of that, but it's versus just being like, we are in the passive on the TV show, so we're watching somebody else go through it. So I think that's one of those things that games just convey, because you're the one holding the controller. So I get what you're saying, but I think that is just a format difference than anything.
Well, that's just where I do wonder if they had made a 10th episode, like, just to build that out. Well,
technically they did, because the first episode,
in terms of content,
the first episode was supposed to be 2 episodes. They just squeezed them together into one. But the other thing I was thinking of was when you were saying like it felt kind of like whiplash and how quick it was that some of these turns happened. I do think that part of that is also because we have episodes where we spend time with other people, like episode 3, where it's without Joel and Ellie basically at all. I mean, you get Joel in flashback version, but like with that episode, I think that like that does technically take away time from that connection. But I think the more important thing that we got out of it overrides that in such a way that like, that is like an all-time great episode of television. That is just like, finale of MASH, like, like goes down in history style. Like for me, like the only other episode of television that kind of like comes to mind for me of like, holy shit, I enjoyed it so much, was like Lost with Not Penny's boat, kind of like that. It's such an impactful episode of television that I'm like, it's okay to me that it kind of caused a little truncation in the other stuff. Granted, again, I have that knowledge of Joel and Ellie's connection anyway, so I can piece that puzzle together. I can't speak for anybody that, you know, hasn't played the game. So
I would be curious to talk to somebody, because like, you know, it's only at the time of this recording, you know, about 48 hours from when it first aired, and I haven't gotten to actually talk to really anybody who, other than my wife, who didn't play the game, who only watched the show, and be like, what did you think of the ending? Like, because I do think I think you start the discourse again of like, maybe what happened. I don't remember there being as much discourse around when the first game came out, but you know, it's like watching it, especially making that episode 43 minutes. As soon as I saw that runtime, I was like, oh wow, we're gonna things are gonna happen.
It's just run and gun, spray and pray, baby.
I was like, this is gonna be, speaking of whiplash, like this will be very crazy out of the blue. And then again, how they end it right as exactly at the game. Like my wife and our friend were just like, what? And I was like, yeah, that's it. Like, that's how the story ends. For now,
they live happily ever after.
But you know, so I think what was the point I was making? I think it
was about the truncation and everything. Yeah,
I'd just be curious to see if anyone shares that, or if I'm just overthinking it, possibly, of just because I played the game.
Yeah,
does it feel does it have that feeling of just like, I don't know if it was earned for him to do what he did, or if I agree with it.
I think
that's part of the interesting part of this show is like, you may or may not agree, but like it's going to make you feel something.
Yeah, I do think like we'll get back to some other stuff that happened in the middle of the show too, but we can jump right into that finale stuff. Like, I think they got there organically. It might have felt a little truncated, but I do think that they developed Joel in a way in this that made up for some of that truncation, where it's like the conversation he has with Tommy, where he's saying that Tommy needs to take Ellie the rest of the way. And giving him the panic attacks of like, he's not having a panic. Like he's not having a panic attack because he's, you know, oh shit, I'm old. My heart, I have the big one. Yeah. He's doing this because he's realizing he's connecting to the character or to Ellie more. And so I think that doing those things and enhancing his character in that way allows for the finale experience to like make a little bit more sense in that truncation. Whereas like if it didn't do that, I fully agree that it would not, like what he does would not make any sense. Not even whether or not, like, because the debate about what happens in that moment has always been like, do you think he's a good guy or bad guy? And what Neil Druckmann always does when people ask him that question is, or say like, oh, so Joel's the bad guy, and all he will ever do is be like, oh, you think so? Like he won't like agree one way or the other, because that's kind of the point of it. It's supposed to, like, just like the second game is divisive intentionally, that moment is supposed to be divisive intentionally. And so I think that it's doing the same thing. It is funny to relive some of these conversations years later. But it's gonna get worse with the sequel. But I'm not ready to relive those conversations.
I can't wait to just watch people's reactions, but again, that's for another time.
I hope the same thing happens where like 2 months before it comes out, the whole thing leaks. Oh, gosh. The whole show is just like online. But yeah, so in more detail with that, with the whole like Joel go, like I do think, I will say, I agree with you in one part of this episode, how it is a little rushed, is him making his way through the hospital. Maybe that's because that took me like 17 tries when I was playing the game, because I was like so low on ammo and they just don't supply it all that much. But I do like the way that when he was going through like the stairwells and stuff, he was like changing out the guns and being like, like that is the thing you were saying earlier of like, that's the good way to do that kind of Easter egg, where it's just like, this is how it works in the game. You run out of ammo, gotta pick up another gun. But the way that the scene played out, the thing that I was wondering, after, you know, I do think we should have spent a little more time with that kind of him making his way there, in the actual operating room. There's a thing you can do in the game. Like there's no choice with the doctor. The doctor, they force you to kill him. That's the only way you can continue in the game. The next thing you do in the game, it kind of nudges you towards, but you don't have to do it. And I did not know you did not have to do it. So I was wondering if he was going to kill the nurses, because at that point, it so naturally comes to you as the player to be like, all right, we're just over the edge now. We're just going to kill everybody. And in my head, that's what you're supposed to do in the moment. There is no what you're supposed to do in that moment. And so, I was curious how they were going to handle that. So I'm not surprised one way or the other. I was just like so intrigued by how they were going to handle that.
They filmed both. And
I did they?
No, I don't know.
That would have been crazy. I would love
if they're like,
it's like Clue. Some people got the different ending. I don't really remember what I did in that moment. It was a long time ago, but I'm glad he let them live, because It shows he's not fully gone.
Exactly.
Although he kind of is. Like, they still, the rest of the episode is basically like, Joel's fully gone. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so tough to watch him lie to her face, knowing that she doesn't fully buy it, but says okay. Like, it is like, it's rough to watch, and it's like, it's rough to go through in the game, but it gets that reaction. It gets it just makes you think about those situations.
The Last
against
of Us.
All odds. What
really makes you think.
What do you do? It makes you think.
Put it on the back of the box.
But yeah, I mean, I can go back and talk a little bit about some of the other stuff in the episodes, but I mean, I think, again, the things that they added, I mean, the Bill and Frank stuff.
Real quick before we go through that, did you see
Sure.
the cameo in the surgery?
In the surgery? No.
Because we didn't even talk about the big, like, that's Ashley at the beginning being Ellie's mom, which I think is beautiful. That's really very, nice casting.
Very
I
nice.
think that's very good.
Yes.
In the operating room, one of the nurses is Laura Bailey.
Who's Laura Bailey?
Laura Bailey, also on Critical Role, plays Abby.
Oh.
Which we won't go into much about Abby.
Games.
Yes, we won't go to Laura Bailey's also in the Uncharted series for Lost Legacy and 4. She's like she is one of the prolific voice actors.
Got it.
Yes.
Kid Trunks in Dragon Ball Z.
Yes. Also, everybody's favorite version of Catwoman, the Telltale games.
Cool.
Yeah. But yeah, she's in like 9 million different things. But also everybody should watch The Legend of Vox Machina on Amazon Prime. It is very good. But yeah, I just thought that was a really fun thing. Also, like, without going into specific details about the second game, like, it's a haha connection to that moment with that.
Sure.
So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, you were about to go into episode 3 stuff.
Yeah. I just think God, I think we could do a whole hour
you can't
about it.
That's the thing, is you can't not talk about this episode.
I know.
When talking about it.
I think the thing it's interesting, because that's the one moment that I've definitely told the most people, like, oh, that's not in the game. Like they are in the game, technically. It's
in the game, but not even remotely as explored, or it's actually
no.
Like, Frank is the only way you find out about Frank is in basically a suicide note where he was like, I'm leaving you. So
yeah. Which even then I was talking about, like, it's not even like the strongest implication that they are, partners, like romantic partners. Like, they use the word partner. He says he was my partner.
Yeah.
But it's in the context of, like, could it be that? Could
in
it just be, hey, we were like smugglers together?
Yeah. In 2013, especially, that could have been a vague term to kind of work around things.
But I also love the idea of, like, if it was meant to be romantic partners, it's like they're like, very catty lovers, where it's like, I leave you a note, or it's like, I hate you. Like, I can just picture them being like, arguing at every turn, and just like kind of being like, well, any port in a storm, right? I guess I'm stuck with you.
Well, that's the thing, is like, in the game, literally that note is Frank saying, I'm leaving. And he dies because when he leaves, he's like, guess you were right. Guess I couldn't live without you. Like, it's yeah.
So it's like, it's interesting.
And I do like that they do nod to those argument aspects. Like,
sure.
But do it in a much more lovely way.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, that to do such especially in the third episode, just like a screeching, or come to a screeching halt is what I should say, with the narrative, to show this like 45-minute interlude showing where they're going and who they're going to see and what the background is, was like, one, just wild. Like, I remember watching it and being like, sure. Yeah, and I just remember watching it and being like, man, I don't even remember who Bill is in the game. Like I was like, I have to look up who this guy is because I was getting him confused with
David.
for some reason I was like, no, not David, but I was getting him confused. For some reason I thought he had something to do with the part where you are going around to the sniper to go to the tower.
Right, yeah.
I conflated those two moments in the game.
Well, that's the thing. It's like the game is like, all right, time to go to a new place, meet right. one person, and then kill some zombies or people, and then you move on and do it again and do it again.
So I was just kind of like fuzzy. I'm like, man, I don't remember who this guy is, but looked it up afterwards. But
and you were like, yes, that place. That's a town away from where Mikey lives. Right.
Yes. Hey, they did have Cumberland Farms, so I'll give them credit.
Loved it. Made my New England heart swell.
Honestly, I thought though it should have been a Dunkin' Donuts, but that's a whole other thing.
Well, no. So the thing is, for a long time, if you go out Route 2, let me also point out, like, there was a whole thing locally with these first few episodes about people like making fun of the fact that like there's no mountains in this area, blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, there's no mountains, but like you've driven on Route 2 going west out of Boston.
Yeah.
That hill that you have to drive up, like, is an immediate 350 foot evolution or like vertical elevation, and like your ears pop. It's so like drastically fast how high you go so quickly. So I'm like, it's not like it's not hilly, so like calm down, people. But also when you go out Route 2 and you get out to basically Lincoln, there used to be a Cumberland Farms out there. So like, I don't know if they actually realized that specifically, or just used a local. They're not around like that part of Massachusetts as much anymore, but like, it would be cool if that was like a note from somebody local on the team that was like, yeah, I lived there. There's one of these there.
Oh, could you imagine if they made it a Wawa? Everyone would revolt.
Burn this place to the ground.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously that episode was like incredibly impactful, incredibly well done, incredibly like just. I wasn't ready for any part of it. I don't think anybody was. I mean, my wife and I were like, "Oh, let's watch The Last of Us." Just we're tired. Let's watch it while we're in bed. And it was like, oh.
And then just sobbing.
Just like, what is
the
happening?
Most beautiful episode of television of all time.
Like, just like, whoa, this hit me like a ton of bricks. Was not expecting this. So I really don't know, like, what else can be said about it, because it was everybody I talked to was like, yeah, man, episode 3 really gets you. And it's like, it's just a really wonderful thing to see this complicated relationship evolve and change, and given the circumstances of a doomsday prepper and a person who probably two people who probably would not get along in the regular day, in like a normal time.
Well, it's also like you think about when it's supposed to be. Like, it's supposed to be 2003 when this happens, because they go 10 years prior in the show. Excuse me. And I think they do a good job of telling you through the like moments of them interacting with one another in that first kind of day that they have, where in that time period, even in Massachusetts, like, I know that we are like, we were the first ones with gay marriage here, like all that stuff. But like, I don't think people recall just how fucking shitty that kind of stuff with like homophobic bigotry was still like happening everywhere. And it was so entrenched to the point where like the biggest songs in the world used F slur. Like it's crazy. And so like, even in Massachusetts, and Lincoln is a small town in Massachusetts specifically, like you have this thing where it's just like, yeah, he probably could not come out to his neighbors because they were all like old towny folks who have lived there for 80 years. And it's, I think they do a good job explaining why the moment was such a release for him too. Yeah.
Well, plus, I mean, it's been pointed out to me a couple times. It's like, considering when this is happening in the narrative, it's like, well, same-sex marriage was never passed in this timeline.
It was literally like
because it didn't happen until 2004 in Massachusetts.
It was a few months later, pretty much. Yeah. It was nuts.
So, you know, the scene of them, you know, getting married. I mean, you know, obviously it's not legal in their world, and not that
there's
it really
no
matters
laws in that
point.
time.
Right, but it's like it's a wonderful moment of we make our own rules, so to speak, and this is how we want to end our lives together. So it doesn't matter. It's
more about the promise that we are making to one another than anything.
Right. Yeah. So it's just it was great. I mean, it was just so wonderful. Like, it's just like, even thinking about it, I just was like, oh, okay, just check myself. I don't want to choke up.
And that's the thing, is like, it's emotional, and like, just talking about certain things in the episode, like, yes, like it makes you want to like cry just thinking about it. But like,
yeah,
it's beautiful in a way that also like it goes through these like tumults of like, it has those like emotionally down moments, but it also has like the strawberries moment, and like just such beautiful warmth at the same time.
It has to be the most beautifully shot episode, because there are so many shots of just like the sun and the like the wind hitting like just the plants, and just like the lighting in it is wonderful.
Well, and on top of that, just the fact that Frank is trying to keep the area living,
right?
Like, he's trying to keep it a living town, and even though it's just the two of them.
Yeah. And I think obviously you get that last shot of like the window open, which is the nice Easter egg to the title screen.
Yeah, that is
just crazy. It's
such a good like, I do like, we already know they're gonna do a similar thing with the follow-up, but like, yeah, it's the way that they handled this show. And like, I've seen people debate like, well, they should have showed Joel walk in. I'm like, no, they shouldn't have. That would have fucking ruined the whole show.
Oh, yeah. There's no need.
Yeah. Like, we saw a life of love fulfilled, and that's all that mattered. And it's like, oh, man. Okay, we need to move on, because I'm gonna cry. But yeah, like, moving forward from here, it's like, oh, and to also just very quickly touch on, I did a brief little Twitter thread on previous to episode 3, when they go from the seaport overlooking Faneuil Hall Marketplace over to the old, and I was like, you know what, they did a pretty good job with this. Like, all things like,
even in the game,
the game I think is a little easier to do that with. The game is literally the State House in Boston.
Yeah.
It's the one where they are filming in the show. But like, I think they do a good job of conveying, like, I was in my work Slack, like, talking to people, and I was like, yeah, so if you were to do the traversing they just did, like, just on the street, not having to climb through buildings and shit, it would take you about 12 minutes. And everyone was like, what? And I was like, yeah, that's literally like a few blocks from here to here, and then another couple of blocks from here to here. And it kind of blew people's minds a little bit that we're not ever around Boston. But yeah, like, moving forward, this, like, I'm glad that we got a full episode to explore that, because like, the way they then handled Henry and Sam, I think was also really well done, but I don't think it would have held quite the same value in terms of if they tried to explore like flashbacks with them. So like, I'm glad that one was still kept sort of in the actual like real time of the show, because it is like, that was one of those moments where I was just like dreading the end of the episode, knowing what was coming, just to know the moment when Henry was going to have to pull the trigger is just like, and I'm curious, like, how did that go for D? Because that's like,
not well.
I presume
it was very, that was the episode where she was like, I shouldn't get too attached to guest stars, should I? Was like, I would say that's a safe assumption to make.
Yes.
Like I was like, I don't want to spoil anything, but like, yeah, not a bad like check to make before you go into an episode.
The positive aspect of the Frank and Bill stuff is not the usual case.
Because I mean, in a show like this, like, anytime, at least in this game, I would say I'd have to remind myself about the second, but at least in this one, it's like, don't get comfortable with anyone but Joel and Ellie, like, truthfully. And if you look at it, I mean,
it's Tommy.
You know, it's Tommy, but like, you know, Tess, Frank and Bill, Henry and Sam, like Melanie Linsky, I forget her character's name.
Kathleen.
Like, Kathleen.
But she's also not in the game. So
no.
Yeah.
But you know, it's like just basically if you see a person you recognize or like they have a meaty part, odds are they're not going to be in the rest of the series.
But I do appreciate that they, like, with that aspect of it, they didn't treat like the villain side or the hero side, like, not heroes and villains, they're just people, but like the antagonist and positive guest stars, they treated that equally. It wasn't just like ripping your heart out with the positive characters. They were also like, no, we're gonna fuck up like the bad people too, don't worry about it.
No, every bad person death was very sad.
And that's the thing, is like, they're equally emotional when you have to say goodbye to those characters, but like one side of it is like, I don't want to say goodbye to it, and one of it is, oh fuck, I want to say goodbye to this person.
The only people I would have loved to have seen more of is the couple in the cottage.
Yes. Graham Greene and what is her name? I think I have it in my notes. Graham Greene is the actor. I think he was in Dances with Wolves.
To me, that is the one of the better portrayals of married that I've seen. Her just like, I love this. You tell her the truth. Yeah, you telling me the truth.
Elaine Miles was the actress who played the wife of that couple.
Yeah, I was having a great time with that. You know,
they were a joy, because they were just like, you know, we're over it. We'll say what we want to say.
You've got a good place to hide. Hi, we've been here before.
This is just what we live. But yeah, like, that's leading into the when they're heading to Jackson, and they get surrounded, almost like it's the Two Towers and it's the Riders of Rohan just surrounding them on horseback.
They needed a banner.
Howard Shore music coming in the background.
Yes.
But yeah, I like that reunion once they do get back to Jackson, and you get to see Joel and Tommy reunite. You know, you get to see the Mandalorian hug Ghost Rider. It's lovely. But yeah, I just that whole Jackson sequence where they're experiencing like civilization again. I think that's sort of, it's not, I don't want to say like forgettable, but like, I think it's going under the radar for how good that whole section is, whether it's Joel showing how vulnerable he is with Tommy, whether it's, you know, the reference of like, this isn't in the game, but like them watching The Goodbye Girl, where it's like, that's all about like a man coming into this apartment with a woman and her daughter, and like finding a connection with that daughter who has like abandonment issues. And it's like, that's such a good on the nose reference that like only some people are going to understand. And then you have just, you know, and of course, like Ellie never makes the connection with it because she leaves before, like, she doesn't watch the movie. She goes and listens to Joel have that conversation with Tommy. And like, this is the one moment where I do think it might have been a little rushed. The confrontation of the bedroom scene where Ellie and Joel kind of have a fight, and then the next morning when he's like, no, it's up to you. If you want me to go, I'll go. Like, that seemed a little bit quicker than I wanted it to be. Like, I almost feel like there should have been one more conversation with Tommy after the bedroom confrontation scene. And then that would have like helped it settle in a little bit more. But, you know, other than that, I think that this is another like beautifully made episode that like kind of goes under the radar just in terms of it's surrounded by such other great stuff.
Yeah. Well, I feel like too, they changed. This is something they did change from the game of like where they meet up. It's like, this is definitely setting up, because I'm pretty sure that's where
this is the, I think this is the dam in the game, right?
In the game, it's the dam, but if I'm not mistaken, Last of Us 2, like
this is where they are
at Jackson. Yeah. So it's
they
like,
do show the dam in their traversing like quickly, but
So obviously, like, I think there's probably stuff that like, I kind of like that, because it is kind of, if I had to rank like a forgettable episode, I would probably say it's that one, just because it's like, it's the lull, like nothing happens except dialogue and like progressing character development, I guess, but it's by far the least action-packed episode. But it's going to be interesting to be like, oh, but this is actually, we're showing you a lot of stuff that you're going to need to be familiar with for season 2 and 3, potentially.
The people who have not played or, you know, in my case, watched somebody else play the second game, like that's one of those things, again, that's probably like, I wonder how that episode comes across to people who don't know.
Right. Right. Well, plus, especially where the season ends, it's like, they're not going back to Jackson. They're back in, or maybe they are, but it's like,
it's just that,
okay.
It's daytime, so you don't see the lights and stuff on. So yeah.
Got it. But yeah, it's like, I think it's like kind of the underdog episode of like, it's gonna be, and I mean, obviously there's the moment that everyone was like, is that what's her name?
Is that Dina?
I'm thinking
I was about to mention
Dina, that. Where it's like, probably
well,
it is.
Without saying yes, during the official podcast, Neil Druckmann basically said yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I saw that. So it's you know, it's part of a bigger story, and I do think that's always something that's really interesting when people get to kind of do like a do-over of a story, is like, how can you start to tie in certain things versus in the game, obviously they're potentially retconning stuff. I can't remember if they do or not off the top of my head, but obviously they're able to put the blocks in place earlier, which some people may like, some people may not, but whatever, I'm indifferent to it. And if it helps tell a better story when season 2 comes out, great. I'm fine for that.
Well, that's the thing with like that cameo appearance of Dina. It's just like for people who aren't watching, that's just a funny, like, weird kid.
Exactly.
So like, it doesn't matter to them, but like to people in the know, that's a fun thing to be like, oh shit, was that? Because my work Slack was
I had that exact moment. I was
out about it.
Yeah. Do we want to start talking about potential?
But we should talk about David stuff, probably.
Okay.
Because I'm surprised at how brief this section was. One episode for this was a little surprising to me.
I think they did it very well.
Oh, they did it. They did it well. It's just, I like, in my head, if I was planning it out, because it's kind of a culmination point, that probably would have been 2 episodes. But
yeah,
I don't make shows for HBO, so you know, probably the right call.
Yet, growth mindset. Yeah. No.
Call me Zaslav.
I will say, I really don't think I have notes on this one, because it was, to me,
this is about as one-to-one as it gets.
Yeah, it was creepy. It again, I knew what to expect. My wife did not, and she was very startled. I think the only
I'm sure on multiple points that come up. I'm sure.
I just said no notes, but maybe my only note. And again, this is only because I knew it was about to happen. Right. My wife did not. I don't know if they got across clear enough
what the meat was.
Yes.
Yep. I've seen that a lot. Yeah.
Because if I remember the sequence of events, when Ellie's in her cell, she sees an ear on the floor, and that's when she like starts to freak out, but you don't know why.
Yeah.
And then it takes like, I think there's another scene in between, and then David goes down and she said, "You're eating people." And my wife was like, "What? Oh my God, really? Are they?"
They didn't lean on the gag from the game as much, where they like continuously call it venison. Like they do it a little bit in the show, but like in the game, they're like every 5 minutes they're like venison.
So like that's one of those moments where I was like, you know, am I getting the benefit of knowing what's about to happen?
One scene earlier, basically, and I think because
so,
it should have been see the ear. She freaks out in the cage. It cuts back to them making the stew, and then he says the venison thing. And then it cuts back after David has eaten a bowl of human stew to them. Yeah.
That's like the only like edit note I feel like I would have. I just think it could have been a little bit more of a audience
clarity thing.
Connects the dots themselves before Ellie says it.
Yeah.
Because it loses its impact. You know, show, don't tell.
Yeah.
It loses its impact with her just being like that. Because if you didn't connect the dots and you're not following along, you'd be like, where did that come from?
Yeah. There is stuff within this that I think was done really well with like, again, this is where a game actor comes through. Also, we didn't mention it, but like the actor that plays Tommy in the game was Kathleen's like main guard in the show.
Right.
But like Troy Baker is, I almost said Aikman for some reason. Troy Aikman shows up in this show.
I want that show.
Pretty wild. But yeah, he's playing Buddy Boy. He's playing the little gopher for David.
Yeah.
And he was on Kind of Funny for their reaction or discussion to this episode, and he was talking about these things that I saw him doing, and then like once he mentioned it, I was like, oh fuck yeah, that was actually like really good. Where it's like when they're sitting down and they're all eating the bowls, and there's something in the character where there's hesitation in his character with a lot of what he's doing. He's not defying David in a lot of ways, but he's like, keep your enemy close kind of thing, like be the right hand of Satan in a way. That's not stuff that you get in the game, and I think that's stuff that like he was saying like he kind of chose to do that, as opposed to like it wasn't like an instruction
I saw that for sure.
Yeah, and it wasn't an instruction from Neil or anything. That was just him making an acting choice, and I think it was done really well, especially with like you see it in the earlier stuff where it is like him and David and Ellie in the confrontation stuff, and you then get to the point where they're sitting down and having dinner, and he is like, he looks over and David is like, we better eat that fucking stew. And then he has that moment after he takes the bite where he's kind of like, oh no, it's good. Like he doesn't say it, but like he has that reaction of like, it doesn't taste bad. Shit. And it's there's just like a lot of subtlety in that character that is essentially a throwaway character. He's just there to get a cleaver in his neck. So like, it is like really cool to see something like that kind of again expanded on. Those are the things that I think they did such a wonderful job expanding on, because that's like, nobody cares about that character otherwise. It took me a minute to remember
he's a goon.
He's just some guy. So I thought that was cool, and I wanted to make sure we touched on that too. So
yeah, for sure.
If you want to speculate, I mean, it's gonna be weird to speculate on season 2 stuff. But they did say that with season 2, or the second game, it's not going to be one season.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah.
Because this has been.
I will tell you, even though I didn't play it, too much shit in that game. It's too long.
Yeah. I've been saying this for a while. Where like I think that I was hoping they were going to say that, because it's a long game. I mean, obviously, again, can I go spoilery here, or should I keep it completely vague? I'll go vague.
I would err on vague.
Yeah. There's a lot of content to that game. There's a lot of flashbacks. There's a lot of different things you're dealing with, and I think, I mean, again, I think it's just going to be like, okay, I've seen a couple of comments come out now that they've done the finale. We're going to do a little bit more infected. We're not going to, I think they've said something along the lines of like, that we're going to continue to expand on things. So, okay, obviously we're going to probably have at least 2 more seasons, maybe 3, who knows? But I mean, honestly, like, I'm already thinking about watching a couple of things from that game and being like, man, this is going to be tough to watch, because it was tough to play.
That stuff from the first trailer that they showed.
Yeah.
Not the first teaser where she's just playing guitar, but the first trailer with the slicing, or no, the first trailer is the hammer. The woods.
Yes. The woods. Yeah. So it's like, it's a more brutal game. It's a more visceral story. Like it's a more brutal game. And that's the thing
I've always, Neil always said that the first game is about love and the second game is about hate. And that is the biggest thing to convey to people going into the next couple seasons is it's going to be intense and like hard.
Yeah, no, I mean, the one thing I've said to multiple people who have watched it, I was like, who haven't played the game, is I was like, all I'll tell you about the second game, if you've never played it, is I would say the underlying message of the entire game is actions have consequences.
Yeah.
Whether you intended them or not. And like, it's not like it's the most out there, ridiculous, smart thing I've ever said, but like, that is all I felt during that game was like, oh, and what inspires some of those actions is, to Neil Druckmann's point, hate.
Yeah.
Whether that's right or wrong.
Yeah. Addiction to hate and addiction to revenge is, it's right. It's brutal.
So it's going to be,
but there's going to be there'll be a big new monster. It'll be fun.
Yes.
The one in the basement, that one.
Yep. Yeah. I think, I'm excited to see it. I really hope they just adapt the game. I don't want there to be like a Last of Us 3. I don't think I got asked that question the other day. Do you think they'll make a third? I was like, I really don't want them to. I didn't actually really want them to make 2. I didn't think they needed to.
Yeah.
But
I think they will.
They stuck the landing.
I think they will. I don't necessarily think it'll be the next game. Because they're doing
I don't either.
They're doing a multiplayer game right now. Which at this point, I don't know, next year that'll come out maybe. Yeah. And then again, I keep referencing Kind of Funny, but Neil Druckmann was after the finale was on Kind of Funny and talked about they are working on something. Didn't say what it was, but he said it's the thing we're most excited about. And to me, Neil would maybe be the most excited about Last of Us 3, but I feel like the rest of the studio might be most excited about doing something different in the meantime.
So part of me thinks Neil Druckmann is going to go Hollywood and be like, cool, I'm done with this soon, but we'll see.
He's going to make the jump faster than Kojima. Kojima's going to be like,
I mean, they haven't adapted Kojima successfully, nor have they tried. So
Oscar Isaac, come on, bring it together. Get that Metal Gear movie.
Yeah, I am very. I guess if I had to say any word, it's not even excited for the second season. I think I'm just like so intrigued to see, because like we're going to hit things out of the gate pretty quickly that are going to be complete and utter shocks to some people.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I find it weirdly entertaining to be like, I'm in the know and a lot of people are not. And, I will say, who knows? My wife, Dee, said the other day, she was like, should I read about it? Should I spoil it?
Do not.
And I was like, if you want to know the story, we should either play through it together. Like I can play, you can watch, or you should just do a let's play. But, I think you should just wait if you can. Realistically, it's about 2 years away.
Except if there is a level of trauma that may come with that shock. That's the caveat, right? Yeah. But it's hard to gauge what that would be unless you say what it is. So yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing I'm intrigued about, and also how they're going to handle the storytelling. because there is a thing that goes on in that game that is going to be like perspectives. So that's just going to be a thing that's going to be interesting to handle. But I think we've gone on at least 20 minutes longer than my usual episode. So I think we can wrap it up. Thanks for coming on, Casey. It is always good to have you on. I'm going to send you a list of everything I'm planning on doing this year for episodes. And you can kind of like, if it's not already taken, just do a little check mark and let me know. Because there's a new Ninja Turtles movie.
Ugh.
And
damn, that trailer was way better than it had any right to be.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, we can talk about that.
Spider-Verse changed the world. I don't know if you know this. And it happened to a little bit of splash landed on Ninja Turtles. I'm very excited about that. So
I feel like I saw it and I was like, I haven't watched the second movie I'm about to reference, but I was like, it's like Spider-Verse and Puss in Boots had a baby with the Ninja Turtles, and it's because I hear the new Puss in Boots is beautiful, and everything I see of it, I'm like, oh, that also has kind of that.
And did you watch Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio yet? Okay, good.
I did.
It's beautiful.
So,
beautiful.
I'm very excited. This whatever. We're not talking about Ninja Turtles right now, but I would love to potentially talk about it.
It sounds like that'll be it, and that also means there's multiple episodes of Ninja Turtles because I want to watch them all again and talk about all of them.
Okay. I'll stand by.
Including the bad ones.
I will stand by. Criterion Collection should release the first one on 4K Blu-ray.
Absolutely.
If there's a God
go
in this
old school,
world.
do it on Laserdisc. Go old school Criterion. Just do Laserdisc only.
With that weird handwritten logo.
Yeah. FHE all in there.
Yes.
All right. Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on again, and
my pleasure.